The Long Snow at Hollybank. The Hearthside Chronicles. Chapter 1. Snow Before Dark. The snow began at 3:20 in the afternoon, while the light over the valley was still the colour of weak tea. It did not arrive all at once. It came the way snow comes when it intends to stay. A few flakes wandering past the kitchen window like feathers shaken out of a pillow somewhere above the hill, and then a few more, and then a slow and steady falling that made the whole afternoon go quiet. Nell Ashbrook was at the sink when it started, washing the last of the apples she had brought up from the cellar. She stopped with her hands in the warm water and watched. There is a particular hush that arrives with the first proper snow of the year, a softening of every sound in the world, and she wanted to stand in it for a moment before the evening carried her off into all the small jobs that were waiting. Hollybank sat at the top of a lane that had no reason to go any further. Beyond the gate, the track narrowed to a footpath, and the footpath climbed into the fields, and the fields went up and over the shoulder of the hill towards nothing at all except more hill. The house was low and long, and made of the same grey stone as the walls around it, so that from a distance it looked less like a building, and more like something the field had decided to grow. Nell dried her hands on the cloth that lived over the rail of the range and went to see about the fire. The range had been lit since 6 that morning. It was an old cream one with 2 doors and a warming shelf, and it had a temperament, which Nell had learned over 11 winters, the way you learn the moods of a good horse. It liked to be fed a little at a time. It did not like to be hurried. She opened the door and slid in 2 split logs of ash, which burns well even when it is not perfectly dry, and closed the door again, and the fire made a small approving noise. On the rug in front of it, a cat called Tuppence lay in the shape of a comma and did not open her eyes. Outside, the snow thickened. Nell went round the house, doing the things that wanted doing before dark. She brought in 3 armfuls of wood and stacked them in the alcove by the door, where the warmth would dry them overnight. She filled the big kettle and set it on the hot plate. She checked the lamp in the porch, because the lane was steep and unlit, and it was a kindness to anyone climbing it to have something to walk towards. Then she stood in the doorway with her cardigan pulled around her and looked out at the fields. They were disappearing. That was the extraordinary thing about it. The wall that ran along the top of the near paddock had been a wall all her life, and now it was becoming a soft white line drawn by somebody who was not paying close attention. The gorse was going. The ruts in the lane were filling and smoothing. Everything sharp in the landscape was being persuaded to be gentle instead. The light held for another half hour, and then it began to go in the unhurried way winter light goes, and by 4 o'clock the valley below was a bowl of blue shadow with 3 yellow windows glowing at the bottom of it, which was the village of Ambersyke settling in for the night. Nell went inside and shut the door and put the bolt across, and the sound of the bolt was the last hard sound of the day. Chapter 2. The lane fills in. By 5 o'clock the snow was 6 inches deep against the step, and it was still coming. Nell had the lamps lit by then. She did not much like the overhead lights in the kitchen and rarely used them. Instead, there was a brass lamp on the dresser and another on the deep window ledge, and their light lay along the wood of the table and made the room feel smaller and kinder than it was. She had a pan of soup going, the kind that is not so much a recipe as a habit. Onions softened slowly in butter. Then leeks, because there were leeks. Then potatoes cut small so that they would break down and thicken everything without being asked to. Stock from the jug in the pantry, a bay leaf, a good deal of pepper. She stirred it now and then and otherwise left it alone because soup like that improves in your absence. The wireless was on very low, tuned to a station that was playing something with a piano in it, and she was not really listening, and that was the point. It was somewhere between the second stir and the third that she heard the car. You do not often hear a car on the Hollybank lane. It goes nowhere, and the people who might have business at the top of it can be counted on one hand. The engine sound came up through the snow, all muffled and patient. And then it changed, and the change was the sound of wheels turning without gripping, which is a sound anybody who lives on a hill can identify with their eyes shut. Nell put down the spoon and went to the window. Halfway up the last stretch, where the lane bends round the elder tree, a small red van sat at a slightly wrong angle with its lights on and its back end where its side ought to have been. As she watched, it tried once more, and the wheels spun, and it gave up and stopped, and the headlights went on shining calmly into the falling snow. She put on her coat and her boots and took the torch from the hook. The cold outside was not fierce. It was the mild, heavy cold that comes with a lot of snow, and the air smelled clean and faintly of iron. Her boots made the first prints on the path since morning. She went down through the gate and along the lane with the torch beam swinging ahead of her, lighting up 10,000 flakes at a time and making them look like something falling in a fairground. The van door opened as she came near, and a young woman climbed out in a coat too thin for the weather and shoes that were entirely the wrong idea. "I am so sorry," the young woman said. "I think I made a mess of your lane." "You have made a mess of nothing," said Nell. "That Ben does this to everyone. My own son put a car in the hedge there when he was 20. I have got 3 parcels for Ambersyke and 1 for a farm I cannot find." "Then you have done better than most. Come up to the house." The young woman looked back at the van and then at the lane behind her, which was already smoothing over the track she had made coming up. "Will it be all right there?" "It will be there in the morning," said Nell, "which is more than can be said for the road. Bring anything you need out of it. There is soup on." Her name was Josie Wren, and she was 23, and she had been driving the parcel round for 5 weeks. Nell learned all of this on the walk up to the gate, which took 4 minutes and would have taken 2 in September. Chapter 3. The Kitchen at Hollybank. The first thing that happens to a cold person coming into a warm kitchen is that they stop being able to speak for a moment. Josie stood on the mat inside the door with snow melting in her hair and simply looked at the room, at the lamps and the low ceiling and the range with its 2 doors and the cat who had raised her head about an inch to assess the situation. "Boots off, coat on the peg by the fire. It will dry in an hour," said Nell. "Sit yourself in that chair. It is the good one." The good chair was a Windsor with a cushion on it, set at an angle to the range so that the warmth came at you sideways rather than straight on, which is much the better way to be warmed. Josie sat. Tuppence considered her, got up, stretched from front to back in the slow, luxurious way cats do, and moved 4 feet closer to the fire without acknowledging that anybody had arrived. "She likes you," said Nell. "How can you tell?" She did not leave the room. The soup was ready by then, or ready enough. Nell ladled 2 bowls and cut bread from a loaf that had been made 2 days earlier, and was all the better for it, and put butter on the table in a dish with the chip in the lid. and they ate at the corner of the big table with the lamp between them. Outside the window the snow went on and on. "Does it always come like this up here?" Josie asked. "2 winters in 3. Sometimes it comes and goes by lunchtime. Sometimes it does what it is doing now." "What is it doing now?" "Settling in," said Nell. "That is the only word for it. There will be no van moving tonight, and no van moving tomorrow morning either. And if the plough comes, it will come to the village first and think about the lane afterwards." Josie put down her spoon. "I have got a shift at 8. "Then you had better telephone them," said Nell, "and let them worry about it, because there is nothing you can do about it from here, and worrying is a poor use of an evening." There was a telephone in the hall, an old one with a curly cord, and Josie made her call standing on the cold flagstones and came back looking lighter. "They said the whole northern round is off. 2 other vans are stuck. One of them is in a ditch outside Marley." "There you are," said Nell. "You are the least stuck person on the round. You are merely parked." They had a second bowl each, and then Nell put the kettle back on the hot plate, and the kettle began its long, slow climb towards boiling, which is a sound that has calmed people for as long as there have been kettles. Chapter 4. What the house had kept. Hollybank had been a working farm until 1968, and then a smaller working farm until 1990, and then a house where somebody lived. The evidence of all 3 was still in it if you knew where to look. In the corner by the pantry door there was a row of hooks that had held harness. In the ceiling above the table there was a hook that had held hams. The step into the back kitchen had a dip worn into the middle of it, roughly the width of a boot, put there by 200 years of people going out to see about the weather. Josie noticed the dip and asked about it, and Nell told her, and that opened the way to other things, as one question in a warm room usually does. The dresser had come with the house, so had the long table, which was too big to have got in through any door that currently existed, so it had either been built in the room, or the room had been built around it, and nobody now living knew which. The blue and white plates on the top shelf were not a set. They were 7 survivors of 4 different sets, kept because each one had outlived its family. The clock on the mantel over the fire had belonged to Nell's grandmother, and it lost 4 minutes a week, and Nell put it right every Sunday evening, and had done for 11 years, and the doing of it was one of the small posts that held her week up. "Do you not find it lonely?" Josie asked, and then immediately looked as though she wished she had not. Nell did not mind the question at all. "I did the first year," she said. "I minded it a great deal, if I'm honest. Then something turned over. There is a difference between being alone and being by yourself, and it took me a winter to find where the line was." "Where is it?" "I could not tell you exactly, but I know when I have crossed it, and I do not cross it often now." The fire settled with a soft collapsing sound, and threw a little more light on the hearth. "Besides," said Nell, "the house is full of things that are still going on. The clock wants winding, the range wants feeding. There is a robin who comes to the sill and is extremely rude if I'm late with the crumbs. It is difficult to feel unnecessary when so many things are waiting for you." Josie thought about this while she turned her cup round on the table. "That is quite a good way of putting it," she said. "It is not mine. My husband said it. He said it about the sheep, which he liked less than he let on, but it worked out the same thing in the end." Chapter 5. The Room Under the Eaves. At 9:30, Nell went up to make the bed in the small room at the end of the landing. The stairs at Hollybank turn twice and are steep, and the treads are wide old boards that have their own opinions about weight. Nell went up them with the lamp, and Josie followed with the sheets, and the two of them made the bed together in the way people do when they have known each other for 4 hours and are getting along. The room under the eaves was low. You could stand up in the middle of it and nowhere else. There was a window at knee height that looked north over the fields, an iron bedstead, a chair, and a chest of drawers with a jug and bowl on it that had not held water since before the war, but looked well where they were. The sheets were flannelette and cold as marble, so Nell brought up 2 stone bottles from the airing cupboards, filled them at the kettle, and put them down under the covers, one at the foot and one halfway. "Give them 20 minutes," she said, "and this will be the warmest bed you have ever slept in." Josie knelt at the little window and looked out. The snow had eased. That is what snow does in the evening more often than not. It comes hard until the temperature stops falling, and then it slackens off and lets you see what it has done. What it had done was remarkable. The fields went up and away in every direction, entirely white and entirely smooth, and the walls that divided them were only the faintest grey seams. There was no moon, but there did not need to be one. Snow makes its own light. The whole hillside glowed very slightly, the way a room glows when somebody has left a door open somewhere far off. At the bottom of the valley, 3 miles distant and much further in feeling, the lights of Ambersyke sat in a little cluster, and one of them was the church, lit for Advent, and it looked from up here like something you could hold in your hand. "You can see the whole world from here," said Josie. "You can see about 4 square miles of it," said Nell. "But on a night like this, that is quite enough world for anybody." They stood a moment longer. "There will be foxes out," Nell said. "You will see the tracks in the morning, going right across the top paddock. There is always one that comes down past the gate and stops to look at the house, and I have never once managed to see him doing it." "How do you know he stops?" "Because his prints stop," said Nell. 4 of them, together, facing this way. Then he moves on. Downstairs, the kettle, which had been refilled out of pure habit, began again on its long climb. Chapter 6. The Last Hour. They went back down for the last hour of the evening, because neither of them was quite ready to end it. Nell banked the fire for the night, which is a slow and careful business. You do not want flames. You want a deep red bed of embers with enough on top of it to burn very slowly until morning without going out. She raked it level, put on 2 heavier logs of oak that would smoulder rather than blaze, and closed the doors down to the smallest opening that would keep the drawer going. The kitchen changed as she did it. The bright flicker went out of the walls and was replaced by a steadier, deeper glow, orange rather than yellow, and everything in the room seemed to move half a step closer. Tuppence relocated to the exact center of the hearthrug, which is the position of maximum warmth and maximum inconvenience, and went boneless. Josie had found a box of photographs on the dresser and was going through them slowly, holding each one to the lamp. There were pictures of the house in other decades. Hollybank with a haystack in the yard. Hollybank with 3 men and a dog standing in front of it in flat caps, all of them slightly out of focus because the dog had moved. Hollybank in another snow in 1963, with the drifts up to the windowsills and a boy standing on top of one of them with his arms out like a bird. "That is Peter Ashbrook," said Nell, looking over. "He would have been 9 there. He is 72 now and lives in Truro and complains about the cold. 1963. That was the great one. They talk about it still. 6 weeks of it. The milk froze in the churns and the birds came into the porch. Is tonight anything like that?" "Tonight is a nice ordinary snow," said Nell. "Do not let anyone tell you otherwise in the morning. There will be a great deal of talk in the village tomorrow, and every bit of it will be exaggeration." The clock on the mantel ticked. The kettle, having boiled and been taken off, ticked too in its cooling way, which is a smaller and more irregular sound. The wind, which had been up in the afternoon, had dropped away to nothing at all. "It is so quiet," said Josie. "That is the snow. It takes all the edges off the sound. There is nothing out there that can echo." They sat with that for a while, and it was not an awkward silence, and neither of them tried to fill it. At 10:30, Nell put 2 cups of milk on the hot plate to warm, and grated a little nutmeg over them at the last moment, because that is how her mother had done it, and there had never been any reason to stop. Chapter 7. Morning. Unhurried. Josie slept as though somebody had switched her off. She had meant to lie awake for a bit, the way you do in an unfamiliar room, listening for the sounds a strange house makes. But the bed was warm from the bottles all the way through, and the flannelette had gone soft against her, and the ceiling sloped down close above her like a hand held over a candle, and she was gone within 4 minutes. Once in the night, she half woke, and the room was full of that faint blue snowlight coming up off the fields and in at the low window, and she thought, without any urgency, that she would look out and see the whole white valley again. Then she thought that she would do it in a minute. And then it was morning. The morning was the best part. She came down at 8:30 to a kitchen that had been awake for hours. The range had held its fire through the night, as it had been asked to, and Nell had opened it up at 6 and fed it, and now it was roaring quietly, and the whole room was warm right into the corners. There was bread in the bottom oven. There was tea in a brown pot under a knitted cosy. Tuppence was on the windowsill watching the yard with total professional attention, and the world outside was completely white and completely still. The snow had stopped some time before dawn. Everything had a smooth new surface on it, unmarked except where Nell had gone out to the woodpile and back. The gate was a shape rather than a gate. The elder tree at the bend had 2 inches of snow balanced along every branch, and had not lost any of it, because there was no wind at all to shake it down. "Look at the top paddock," said Nell. Josie looked. A line of neat prints crossed the white field diagonally from the wall at the top to the corner near the gate, perfectly even, as though somebody had walked a compass across the snow. "Your fox." "My fox," said Nell. "And there, do you see, by the post?" He stopped. They had toast at the corner of the table with butter and black-currant jam, and a second pot of tea, and there was no particular hurry about any of it. At 10 o'clock the sound of the plough came faintly up from the valley, working its way along the Ambersyke road, and Nell listened to it with her head slightly on one side. "It will do the village and the school lane first," she said, "and it will be dinner time before it thinks about us. Possibly later. So, I am here until this afternoon." "You are here until this afternoon." Josie found that she did not mind at all. She sat back in the good chair with her hands round a warm cup and looked out at a valley that had been rubbed out and drawn again overnight in one soft colour, and felt the particular unhurried calm that comes over people when a day they had planned has been quietly taken out of their hands and replaced with a better one. The fire settled. The clock, which was 3 minutes fast and would be corrected on Sunday, went on with its work. And somewhere up beyond the top wall, out of sight, The fields lay under the long snow and waited for nothing in particular.